What is going on, folks? It is Steiner here with another episode of Secondhand Talent. Thank you, as always, to Luke Chu for the desk candy and to Mark Spusta for the lovely art. And let's get right to it, folks. With us, we have Ed and Kenny, the guys who run the show at Penguin Guitar Co. And if you're looking for them, folks, they are just a mere 25 miles west of Chicago. Ed, Kenny, pleasure having y'all on the show.
How you doing?
Morning.
Good morning. Yes, at the time of this taping, folks, it is morning, which is atypical for Secondhand Talent. But you know what? Where there's a will, there's a way. Gentlemen, I got to ask because it's always interesting to me when I'm in contact with one person and then I interview two, because I don't know what information has been relayed, how it was framed. So, Ed, I'd love to hear your answer first to this question. When you first heard the term secondhand talent, what came to mind?
Secondhand talent is the group of people that support firsthand talent, right? The people that make the magic happen in the background.
Pretty dead on, well studied, well researched answer right there. I like that. Listen, that being said, it's not that I don't think I've ever gotten the straight definitional response of on the show, and the beauty of this question is that over 100 episodes, I get a different answer every time. Kenny, same question to you. First time you heard the term, what popped into your head?
I'm not going to give as good as an answer. That's a great question. I don't know if I really have one. When I met you and you explained what was going down, I supported it from the get-go, and I guess as far as the definition, it's just pretty spot on. He probably took it right on my head.
Right on. And this is a weird, kind of like full circle moment for us to be over 100 episodes in from luthier to luthier. So we had on, I believe our second interview in the show was Mike Leighton from MJL Guitars. And kicking off the previous season, Leo Elliott from Scarlet Fire Guitars. The reason I love having luthiers on the show is because it was a real massive awakening point for me. Ed, going off of your answer there, the talent that's there to support the firsthand talent, it never occurred to me until I started doing the show. Guitars need to be made. So when you're at that concert and you're watching your favorite musician shred away, somebody built that guitar that they're shredding away on. And it's always a real pleasure for me to interview people in the luthier and instrument crafting space in general, because it is one of the most quintessential necessities in the industry.
Absolutely. That guitar used to be a tree at one point in time.
But even the mighty oak was never a nut like you. What got you? So this is digging back into the history of it. So we started with Ed first last time. Kenny, what got you? What was your first moment in life, or where would you say your musical upbringing was that brought you to this point?
There wasn't a lot of music in my household. My parents, there was no music. There was no anything that would push that. My mom came from a family of 10, and all of her brothers played instruments and music. I've played and recorded, and, they all look like the Allman Brothers and drive Harleys, and they all have long hair, and, and they all play music. So I probably got it from that. My dad, has a lot of art in him. He's a trim carpenter, and he's actually, he was at one point a professional ballroom dancer. I have a lot of art from, a distance, but nothing that really pushed me. I think that was something that I had to take out for myself.
How about you, Ed? What were some of your more formative beginnings with music? Because as I understand it, you know, you're really the main luthier in house, and I'm kind of curious. Making it a two-part question. What were some of your beginnings, in music and coming up? And did you start playing first before building? And if so, what got you into the building side of it? What made you interested enough in that?
Great question. So it's interesting, a little bit opposite of Kenny. I had a ton of music in the house growing up. So like many musicians, and I hear this all the time, I started on piano when I was 5 years old, right? And then once my fingers got long enough to play guitar, I started playing guitar. Now I also grew up, and I'm going to age myself just a little bit here, but when I was a highly impressionable young teenager, would have been like 1984, 85, right? So I had Kirk Hammett, Eddie Van Halen, all of these. It was during the glam rock era, so guitars were everything. We're talking early stages of MTV when they used to play music, right? And so to watch these kind of things as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, all these guys that look like Kenny's uncle, but out there playing, I think about bands like Poison, for example. They'd go through a music video and have 60 different guitars go across the screen at one point in time. And so not only did I have a lot to watch and, just get excited about, but my father was a little bit of a guitar player. So in 1984, a Fender Strat showed up in my house. I still have that guitar. I'm probably going to get buried with that guitar. It's one of the few, like, I'll never sell that one. And but that's kind of where it started back there. So which eventually grew into, and you asked the question, how do we get into the luthier side? Well, like many, I also started playing out with bands, and that would have been like late 90s, early 2000s kind of era. And you'd go and we'd get a gig, but by the time you paid the sound guy and the guys that helped you carry your gear in and everything else, there might have been $50 left over. And it was either, do I keep that money or do I go back to the guitar shop and have my guitar set up for the next show? Right. And so I decided just to start working on my own stuff, kind of more out of financial necessity. Found out I actually loved doing it because my brain's just kind of wired up a little bit that way. Started doing it for other guys in the band, and it was what turned into, let's say, call it a hobby, has turned into a lifelong obsession over this instrument and anything having to do with it.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned 1984 because that year holds a really special significance for music in my own family. So our theme song for the show is called "Shoot the Cool" by Lonely Moans. It was one of my uncle's bands. 1984, he was just starting the band Suburban Nightmare, which wound up becoming the Dwarves. And you know, a highly impressionable my uncle and his former self, started, really rocking out. And another interesting thing that you said, I grew up a lot with you know a lot of music, but from very disparate sides of the musical spectrum. So on my dad's side, he would take me to go see bands like Rare Earth and Three Dog Night and Blue Oyster Cult and like all these like rad bands that like kids my age just didn't know about. And then on my mom's side, Zappa, The Grateful Dead. I have her copy of, you mentioned, that Fender Strat never leaving you. Of all the records I own, I have a few of my mom's records and Waiting for Columbus and Roxy and Elsewhere are never going anywhere. I saw Dweezil recently perform in Des Plaines, and I don't know if y'all were at that show, but
I know what you're talking about, but I wasn't there. You didn't
he
make that either, did you? No.
so we went for Steiner's birthday, and he happened to be playing there on her birthday, and we went, and got to meet him beforehand. He's a great guy, and we noticed one of the guitars on the stage looked really different than the rest of the guitars, and somebody asked him, I remember during the Q&A, somebody asked him, who was your big inspiration? And he just kind of chuckled and said, a lot of people would probably say it's my dad, but Eddie Van Halen was the man, and they played during the show Push Comes to Shove, which Eddie himself acknowledged was the hardest solo he'd ever written, and the band never played it. And it was just really incredible to hear that connection, be talking about this now. That event took place probably halfway between where we are physically at this particular point in time. It's just wild to think. Kenny, I gotta ask, were you like me, not around in 1984?
That's a good one. Yeah, I was not even close. I was born in 96, so
Okay, so we're a little simpatico here. So go with me on this. We really did grow up around the same time, and MTV, was still playing music at that particular juncture. What was the first band or guitarist that you hooked onto that you felt was really something that, like, I need more of this instrument in my life? Like, I need more of, like, this music. Was there a concert, a band, a song, a moment?
a lot of that came really late for me. It came, it came probably in my mid-teenage years. I mean, honestly, the real first one that I became obsessed with was Ace Frehley, and I know he recently passed, and that was disappointing, but a miracle because the guy, lived a rough life, but and heavy touring and all this stuff and alcohol, and I was glad I got to see him twice, and yeah, he was really the first guitar hero for me. I don't know what it was. It was just this different playing. He knew a lot of pop music and a lot of rock music, and a lot of it sounds the same, but he had a sloppy touch that just was just really gritty that I just really enjoyed.
Sloppy Touch is a great name for a band. Just gonna put that out there. But
That's my stage name, Sloppy Touch.
That's funny.
they call him Sloppy Touch. But that's a great of all, like, not. It's interesting because Ace is not a guitarist that I would have thought of as, like, oh, like, it endlessly fascinates me, how we all take in music differently and wrap it in.
Yeah, it was just, for me, it was his swagger. It was every single song
Cool guitar.
had his touch. I'm looking at his guitar that I have in the corner of the room right now. So,
Wait, you have one of Ace Frehley's guitars?
hold on. Can I
Yeah,
grab it?
please
So-
do.
Not ever owned by Ace, but it is a very, 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 very well built replica of one of Ace's guitars. This guitar spent hours on my bench.
So this guitar is a great example of, really great copies out there. This is not a genuine anything, but it's, just a really good copy, and I really like the whole look of it, and this is what it is, and
It sounds great too.
it sounds great too.
It's a gorgeous looking guitar. I mean,
It's pretty.
It looks real. It
It-
ain't.
but it almost looks like a faithful restoration,
Right.
in a certain sense.
Yeah.
And going back to the original, the opening question of the interview, what does secondhand talent mean to you? One of the more interesting answers that I ever got to that question, was from Justin Hampton. And he said, and I'm maybe paraphrasing. I'm paraphrasing here, so it's not a direct quote, but something along the lines of when you go to a Goodwill store and you find a painting that was like a masterpiece, and then somebody else like painted another painting over it, making it into something like completely new. And then it's back at Goodwill again, and you find it, and you're like, well, this is like like a double whammy of a masterpiece here, where it's like this original painting was incredible, and then this other artist put their spin on it and have created something totally new. So I all to say is that I really don't like the term copy, as much as necessary. Let's say like replica, right? Because a copy kind of insinuates that, to me anyway, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, copy versus replica. A replica for me is something that is created with a sort of faithful direction towards something that previously existed, whereas a copy, there's this connotation of just less thought being put into it. It's just kind of like on the line, we're putting them out, we're making more, like on the, you guys know what I mean there?
Sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting because exactly to your point, I think that's oftentimes what we help guitar players do, right? And that they have a certain idea in their head that, like, for example, the Ace Frehley guitar was the one and that they've always pictured, want to have the greatest thing, but they want maybe their version of it, right? So I almost go as far as a lot of the guitars that I find that I build for folks are inspired by something. So for a perfect example, I'm building an inspired by Jim Root Telly for somebody right now. And so that's it. It's not a copy. It's not a replica per se, but it's something that either we or the person that we're working with has decided to try to make their own.
And before we get into the nitty-gritty of what you guys do in the business, I would love to hear a little bit beforehand. First of all, and we'll have it on the screen, or I'll pop a picture up. I love your logo. I love that little penguin. Like looks great on a
Thanks.
headstock, looks great on, I mean, it's such it to me anyway, as like a casual fan of, I'm fumble fingers. I can't play for shit. That's why I became a comedian. Like I could not, my dad played, my brothers play. I cannot for the life of me figure out get I can't get my fingers to fing, man. And I've always just really admired those folks who can shred, and since starting this, that admiration for the guitarists has turned into admiration for the guitars themselves. So once you discovered this knack for luthiery, and that you found that it was something that not only you were good at but you were passionate about, when did that metastasize into something that you wanted to call a business?
A good question too. It's weird. I never got into this thinking it was ever going to turn into a business. But what happened is just over time and just working with a lot of folks, it just grew into something that kind of required us to have to set it up as a business, right? And that passion goes so far back, so far back. I talked about that Strat earlier today. I think I modified that guitar within about a year of owning it. Because again, in the 80s and heavy metal and everything else, that had single coil pickups in it. So I needed to get a humbucker in the bridge so I can make it sound nasty. So a lot of that like passion honestly started, God, now I'm saying it out loud. It sounds weird, but it's almost 40 years ago. 35 years ago, 40 years ago.
it never gets less weird. It never gets less weird to say.
Yeah.
It's always just one of those things. And what I love about the pairing of you two, even on the screen, it almost like it's kind of like a fairly odd couple type situation. And Kenny, when first of all, what was your career like before joining Penguin Guitar Company? And what was it that really brought you in? I want to use the word looped, but like too many guitar references. What what was it that brought you into this kind of scene? How did this connection get made?
That's a good one. My day job, I do microphone sales. So I do that, and there you go. And I've been a musician for quite some time. I was playing with a band and touring all over the Midwest, and uh, I met Ed, and all my guitars needed constant work. So, it was a back and forth, handing off and all this stuff. And so that's how Ed and I kind of, became friendly. But as far as everything else, when he told me, "Hey, this is my vision," I said, "Great, let's do it." And it wasn't a thought. It was just like, I'm gonna be a part of this.
Were you in a position where you were on the road regularly and you made a pivot shift in order to join Penguin?
It wasn't a necessary like I'm gonna stop. It happened
The
at the
timing of that was weird.
The
Yeah.
timing was perfect. I decided at the beginning of this year that I was going to step away from the band that I was in and kind of take some time off. I'm still playing, but I decided that it just
It's just not
it
2 shows every weekend anymore.
it's not 80 shows anymore. So I'm kind of glad. I feel healthier. I feel better, and you know I do miss the constant running around because there is something about it, and if it's ingrained, in you, you don't know what to do, and I'm itching. So when when he told me that we were going to do this or he was going to do this, I included myself in that thought, and and now it gives me that extra energy to use on that, and use that good energy to something that I think could make it. So
Now fast forwarding just a little bit. And I just wanna make sure I'm understanding. I'm trying to, like folks, if you're just listening or reading and you're not watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and check out the video on YouTube. I've been lost in thought as I've been taking in this information, which is the reason we had a little silence on the air there. But I just wanna make sure I've got this timeline down right. So, Kenny, you're gigging, you're playing. Ed, you're already at the point where you've been working on guitars, you've been working on your own, you've been adding things in. Kenny, you're discovering, hey, there's a lot of work to be done on just what I'm working with. And what I'm curious about is like what came first, Penguin Guitar Company or your guys' part?
So when we first started uh, knowing each other, working together, kind of thing, was what, probably 4 or 5 years ago. And it was interesting because the way that we had originally gotten introduced is I had built a guitar that ended up in an auction for a gala event for a local non for profit. And Kenny became the benefactor of that particular guitar. So he reached out and said, "Hey, I got this hand built thing from you, but I want to learn more." Right. And at that time, he was gigging heavily and
heavy.
heavily at that. That was the 80 to 100 years a show time frame, or 80 to 100 shows a year. And so he needed a lot of work coming down. He's like, "Hey, listen, the guy that I'm using right now takes him forever to turn this stuff over. Are you able to do work? Can you help me?" And I said, "Absolutely. This is what I do, right? Come on by." And I started doing a lot of work just on his instruments over the last couple of years, and I continued to build instruments for other people. He ended up with a second guitar of mine, and and it was funny because he was probably swinging by the house slash the shop like once a week. And so What happened was what the genesis of getting the company started is I had the opportunity to do some work with some people that are professional musicians. And the interesting part is they would be doing thousands of dollars of work with me on an annual basis. And all of a sudden they would want to go write that off at the end of the year, right? As an expense used to generate the revenue that they're doing. So they would get so I'd get a call from their accountant at the end of the year going, "Hey, can you provide me some sort of documentation or like a receipt or something?" And I'm like, "Well, I could build something in Word," because for the longest time I was just the local guy, right? It was a cash-based kind of business and it was great. It kept me busy. I made a few bucks a year. It was, but the people that I started doing some work for required a little bit more sophistication. Right. So that's when we decided to actually go full throttle with it. And I set the LLC up and everything else. And now it makes the accountants of the world a little bit happier. But at the same time, it's also opened up some new doors for us. We're doing some really, really neat things for some really neat people right now, which is kind of a cool thing. Very proud of what we've put together here. So Kenny and Ed started before Penguin Guitar Company, but Penguin Guitar Company really, I don't know that I could have done it 100% on my own, right? And Kenny and I work incredibly well together because he's got just as much enthusiasm and passion around the instrument as I do. And I just believe this. That's, if I'm not sleeping or eating, and I'm probably thinking about guitars while I'm doing that too, but it's an all-day thing for me. And so to have somebody that's got this much energy, passion, and enthusiasm, it pairs with me really, really well. Right. So I'm allowed to now kind of spend a lot of time really working on the guitars, which is good. And he's spent a lot of time making sure that the rest of the company's doing the things that it needs to do so people know who we are. And it's, I think when you're passionate about something and you do it for all the right reasons, I think people notice that. And for that reason, we've got no shortage of work right now, which is a really cool thing. Like people in Chicago are appreciating, I think, the work that we're putting out.
I mean, that's a blessing. I mean, to be busy is the best we can ask for. And you're absolutely right. That passion for living, eating, sleeping, breathing, drinking, live music, comedy, whatever form of art it is that, or whatever your medium is, right? Whatever instrument it is, if it's not something that you're totally invested in mind, body, and soul, then that is like you could be an incredible guitar player, but if you have no soul and it's all technical, what are you really trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I see it all the time, and it's it's you know it's easy to see that as a shiny object and go, wow, that's really cool. You know, you know, I don't get fazed by some of that stuff. You know, I really appreciate the players and the people who just, you know, I'd rather have somebody who's not as good but who can play better in a different way, or knows when to sit back. Those are the better players.
The ones who know how to get out of the way of
Yeah,
everybody else, right?
you know, and that's something that I've had to learn. I'm not a super fast player, but that is something that these cats that have been doing this for a while know the difference, and that's why I've had the opportunity to play with some great people, and it's because you got to learn how to get out of the way.
That is one of the truest statements I think that's ever been said on this show. Knowing the perspicacity of knowing when to take a back seat and let the rest of the band, because you guys, we started this conversation kind of talking about, like mid 80s glam rock era where bands like the Scorpions, Poison, like super guitar heavy, like very intricate, almost prog rock, like in some of the technical aspects of what they do, but also imbued with this unique soul that not a lot of music has. And we think of the term one hit wonder, right? Like how many songs are there out there for bands that, like, yeah, everybody knows Video Killed the Radio Star, but did you know it was by the Buggles? Like that's it's like one of those type things. And it's really refreshing to hear that somebody else sees that kind of like how I do. Where that taking a step back, and I one of the most recent concerts I've been to at the time of this taping, friend of the show, season 4 guest, Mark Janowitz invited me out to go see My Morning Jacket. It was my first
Right.
time. This was my first time seeing them, and you know, I became a fan of theirs when I was in high school. You know, when Evil Urges came out, that was Aluminum Park, Highly Suspicious. I mean, it just became one of those albums for me. But I never had the opportunity to see them. And one of the things they did, and this may sound silly, but one of the things they did so well was play as a band. And Carl would walk up and really just rip a solo out. But the I, I hadn't been to a concert in a long time where the band really shone through and knew, like, everybody knew their role. It was actually, like the show I mentioned earlier, Dweezil. For all of his talent, he knows when to let the band shine, just like Frank did. And I think that's a really, really, really important point. Is a great sense of awareness there.
There's a there's there's a difference in what sets the greats apart from the mediocres is the fact that what everything is doing. The reason why you listen to the Beach Boys or some of these other bands that were super, they knew their parts. They knew not as far as the music goes, but they knew their parts as individuals and they knew what they needed to do. And, you hear a lot of loudness in bands nowadays where it's just noise. And that's
Compressed noise.
yeah, it's compressed noise and it's shooting at your head super loud. And it's not, there's no blend, there's no balance. And that is always my thing. It comes from more so than just the people that are in the bands, but the engineers and the people that are listening and where you're sitting. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that people don't see. I have to, my dad's not a musician, but he asks, all this stuff, and I have to explain to him, like, there's like, do you know why that sounds good? He's like, no, but it sounds amazing. I'm like, well, that's because there's blend. It's because there's balance.
EQ.
Well, and it's even simpler than that. It's just it's everything is jiving. There's a lot of things. It's not as simple as just, oh, we need to be louder. There's thresholds. There's science and non-science things that are happening with music, which you have to have the blend of both. This is my whole thing with the balance and blend.
Yeah, I mean, we can always turn it to 11, but if the music's not good, what's the point?
Right, right, right.
Think about some of the greatest stuff that's come out even just recently can be a 3-piece band, 2-piece groups, right? There's a lot of authenticity to that kind of music, which is really cool. And you can tell there's a level of musicianship involved that if you, to kind of go back to your point earlier, there's a lot of really, really incredible bands that are out there that are technically incompetent, but they got really great feel and they know how to put together a great song and they know how to get people to engage and kind of bob their head as they're playing. And it's not about that really weird guitar solo. It's more about the feeling and how it makes you feel when you're listening to it.
The intrusive thoughts almost came out there, and I was about to start throwing shade, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I would rather do is point out a duo. My brother Ben from Boone and Keel. I think, I think there's so much truth to that, to what you just said about, duos and trios putting out some of like the Big Blitz is doing great work out of Pennsylvania. I think they're out of Pennsylvania. Boone and Keel duo out of San Diego. Chicago roots, but out of San Diego. So it's just my brother who plays guitar and Kern, their drummer, and he plays his guitar in such a unique way. If you listen to any of their studio tracks, it doesn't sound like a duo. And even when they play live, it doesn't sound like it. So I put them on tour at the time of this taping about 6 months ago. In May, they were on tour from California to Illinois. I got them like 9 shows in 6 states on their way on a drive. And I was, nobody wants to be a tour manager and not be on tour. It's one of the most like things that like you're just praying that everything works out, and you're calling every 5 minutes like, tell me everything's good. Nobody wants to call a venue 3 days later and ask for a per diem. That's not like, so I watched the first stream. I think and I didn't even wait till after the show. After the set, I texted my brother. I was like, what are you doing? He was like, what do you mean? I was like, where's the bass coming from? And he was like, oh, yeah, no, I have this filter where like I can play the bass out of the top end and the guitar out of the. I was like, and Kenny, kind of getting into what you were talking about the blend. That shit never even occurred to me. Like that you could do that and isolate and filter it in such a way. So I'm really hearing like what you had to say. Like that makes a lot of sense to me just from observing, and watching and hearing my own brother's growth in his guitar playing journey, and the way he's figured out to sound like more than one person at any given point in time.
There's a musician named Charlie Hunter that I've seen, and he plays guitar. It's called the style and brand is called hybrid, and it's a hybrid guitar. And the first 2 strings, it's a 6-string guitar. The first 2 strings have bass strings and bass pickup that's isolated, and the rest is guitar strings. And most people can't play it because it's such an odd thing. You don't think to play like that, but Charlie Hunter is one of those players that can do that.
That's pretty incredible. So what we were just talking about off camera that we're gonna lead into here, we were talking about how people's names spread, and when you're not the person on the stage playing the instrument, but rather the one who built the instrument, right? Well, then it's the people who are playing the instrument that are talking about you. And that is a really fascinating thing. Like, everybody knows Fish and most Fish fans can identify the difference between Trey, Page, Mike, and John. I would say 50% of Fish fans at least know who Chris Kuroda is. Right? Part of the inspiration for this show is that I know so many light directors who do just mind-boggling things with the equipment that they have. And kind of getting back to a little bit of what you guys were saying earlier, like being able to make a unique tone out of what you're working with without all the extra little bits and added parts and outside boxes plugged in, but like with the guitar itself, being able to properly play the instrument, like that's something that you can't really learn or teach. But it takes a great guitar. This only happened once in my life when I interviewed, or when I went over to Mike Leighton's place for the second interview. He was working on a semi-hollow body, and I picked it up and felt like I could play guitar. That if he plugged it in right there, I could have played any song that I wanted to. It's the only time in my life I'd ever picked up an instrument, and it just felt so natural and so good. And I talk about it all the time. And I'm curious, before we get into, all the details of Penguin Guitar Company, was there like a first guitar that you built that got out there that really sparked the heavy interest?
So I'd say there's two, depending on which one you want to talk, because I have both of them right next to me.
Oh, fantastic.
Do we want to? I mean, let's start with the one that answers your initial question. So, uh, Ed built a guitar for me that we decided we wanted to do, and I told him exactly what I wanted, and we figured it out. And we built it, and a lot of people have asked me about it before all this. What is that? Who is that? And it's this one right here.
And I always tell people, I'm like, let somebody play it. Then they'll start asking lots of questions because exactly to your point, you get that in your hands and you're going to feel it pretty quick that it's a comfortable playing guitar.
That looks like we gotta connect you to the Moon City Masters because that looks like something one of my cousins would love to play. Wow, that's a good looking. Oof.
So this guitar is based on a guitar I already have to do everything. So because of how often I was playing, I needed it to be for every application. And we're still modifying it just to get it done. But we built this in 22, and it's kind of just got completed this year.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. But we had the idea for this, and this was kind of the first one that we did, and this was before the Penguin logo. Because of the shade of blue, I thought it looked like, the Roadrunner, which is on here. And actually pretty funny. I picked this up, which is a Roadrunner cup. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
I thought it was Roadrunner blue, which is not something you would necessarily associate with, but I thought it was.
I look at that guitar and I think like Tom Petty and like Wildflowers and like that, like outdoor summer day, like Roadrunner, fuck yeah, why not?
Yeah, that, and because this thing was running on the road with me 100%. Like, this thing was a dog and still is, and so I
got a lot of miles on it.
It's got a lot of miles for it being fairly new, and this thing is just absolutely amazing.
And what are show us some of those nuanced bits that make it unique.
Sure, let's see if I could do this. It's pretty standard, besides the fact that it has humbuckers in it, and these humbuckers split, I believe, on the inside, and so you can make it sound like a traditional Stratocaster. We have a spud buffer that was made by I believe Waltronics, the Jerry Tone Store.
That's one of the boards that's in one of Jerry Garcia's.
Yeah, so
it's an onboard buffer.
Yeah, it's an onboard buffer that's modeled after Spud. I don't know.
Rosebud. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the exact one. And then it's got a kill switch on it that we put on it recently, that we upgraded, and so I can do all the the stuff that I was doing, all the shredding stuff, and then I can flip a switch and I can sound and do all the Jerry twinkly stuff, and this thing does it all, the country, all the R&B, all of it. This thing was really cool, and it still is.
Yeah, and Steiner, when you were talking about some of the nuances of this thing, not only does it got really neat electronics in it that allows you to get all kinds of different sounds, but you take kind of more of a traditional Stratocaster style body, but the top of it is carved, the back of it is carved, and that's all the stuff we talk about where you pick it up and it just instantly feels comfortable.
Yeah.
It's because we manipulated some of the angles on some of the body carves, so as soon as you grab it, it just feels comfortable instantly, which makes it more fun to play, makes it easier to play.
It really reminds me of something that, you mentioned Rosebud, and this it really reminds me of something that Leo Elliott said from Scarlet Fire Guitars about the way Jerry liked his guitars, that there were elements of the Les Paul and there were elements of the Strat that he really loved and didn't want to go without. And the reason that Alligator and Rosebud and Bertha and Tiger are so special is because, they were. I'm roast me in the comments for forgetting his name, but the original luthier of Jerry's guitars, the reason they're Doug Irwin, thank you.
My stuff.
So Leo, so Leo, Leo learned it, was a luthier, but honed it learning from Doug himself. And that custom approach and that combined with that understanding of music, that I think that's what separates it out entirely. I mean, that's a wild combination of capabilities for what on the surface seems like just a regular old Strat, that you'd find at Guitar Center. Like, that's what's beautiful to me about this. And folks, again, if you're reading or listening, hop on YouTube and you can see the actual video of this. If you wouldn't mind, Kenny, holding that up one more time real quick. So I feel like if I'm a typical average, guitar player and I don't really know what to look for as far as the differences in where the pickups are or where, you know, any of the hardware really is supposed to be, if there should be a kill switch or if there shouldn't, I would be that person who, if that were in Guitar Center, would be saying, why is this different? I don't understand. Like, it looks just like the ones you have hanging.
Right. Well, it's the upgraded parts. It's the upgraded locking tuners, so it locks it.
Jeez.
The tuning pegs, the posts lock the string in, so it's not just, there by tension. It's locked by a post that's pushing it to it. It's the difference between, it's fed through the front and not in the back like a telly, or, it's not a floating bridge, because I don't like those. It's mounted through the front and fed,
I think, all's to say, but what I love about it the most, I think, and I think this is what I was trying to say before, is that I love how it doesn't, at least to my untrained, like, as a casual music fan, right? As far as, like, I don't play an instrument, right? But as a fan of the instrument, I love how simple it is. And that's not to say plain. Like, there's elegance and simplicity, but like the fact that it can do so much and has all of these cool, unique elements to it, but duotone body, it's not super flashy looking wood for
Plain
the
Jane.
bridge.
Very subtle.
It's plain Jane. And, this is, like I said, this is modeled after something I already have that I don't really play because it hasn't been playable because of multiple reasons. But I wanted to make something that was, an homage to that, and, and just kind of completed everything full circle with what I wanted. If I was going to spend, $1,000 on a guitar, I don't want to go and get it from somebody else, because you're not getting that. When you build guitars with us, you're getting that. You are spending almost just amount on, the parts, and a little bit on labor, but you're getting everything out of it. So if you went and got $1,000 worth of parts, you're getting $1,000 guitar.
I mean,
You get to pick the wood, and you get to pick, everything that you want, and I was glad I got to do this. I was nervous about it when we first did it, because this was one of the first, the ones that we did. And, this was it's a lot of money, but when you get it and you go, okay, like, I feel confident in this, and you see the final product, and especially now more than ever, we're giving people updates and photos and stuff along the way when we're making these builds. You get it and you go, oh man, like I'll never go back to buying just one off the showroom floor. It's just not the same. It's not, and not that I'm too picky, but the quality, has gone down in manufactured guitars. Well, you see a lot of people building now, and there's a lot of great companies that make parts, and this one's got one of those necks on it.
That's a great, it being one of the first guitars, a great way to segue into the next part of it. We're going to talk about why Penguin? Why the name Penguin of all things? Now, like we said at the beginning of the interview, don't get me wrong, folks, it is an awesome looking logo, but I'm just genuinely curious where did that name come from?
So, I think, dare I say, I think oftentimes a lot of new entities or businesses or whatever sometimes struggle with this, but we had the idea to build a company, but we had no idea what to call it. And it took me forever to come up with the right name, right? Because it needs to be something that works. It's got to be exciting. It's got to grab attention, the whole nine yards. Like a light bulb went off one night. We were just sitting around at home, and it was me and my son. And my son does a lot of work with us, right? He'd call it the third person that is a little more camera shy. He's 15 years old. I've been training him how to work on guitars forever. But ever since he was a tiny little kid, the penguin was his favorite animal. So every time we went to a zoo or whatever the case might be, and then all of a sudden one day it just popped into my head, Penguin Guitar Company, and it was like somebody put a fire under us, because as soon as I had the name, the dominoes started to fall. And that's when he really went full throttle with it, the whole nine yards. It's funny how it took the name of the company to really be as I look back now, it was the genesis of this whole thing. That's when we hit the go button, is once we figured the name out. So, and it was just because it happened to be my little guy's favorite animal, and that's where it came from. So now we put a little tiny penguin on every single guitar we build.
When you're making something that's such a personal instrument, right? And I have a significant attachment to my guy over here, to Dr. Decibel, because it's just the mic. It is my mic. It's got no fancy tweaks or upgrades, but it to me is what is, not that it isn't used on other podcasts or on other shows, but it's quintessentially been, I mean, it has been the microphone that I've used since we started using microphones on the show, because we couldn't afford them when the show started. We still can, but we have one. But it's the fact that the name comes from such a personal place, I think, is so appropriate for creating something that is so personal to the person who's going to be utilizing it. And you mentioned you had a second guitar that you wanted to discuss.
Dude, yeah, give me.
This is the one that started it all with Kenny.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is the one that oh wow.
So
That's
this is a semi-hollow
gorgeous.
Telecaster, and with a maple neck, with a swamp ash top, which Kenny and I were just kidding around a little bit. When I first built it, it was this charcoal gray color that over the years is starting to turn green a little bit.
Yeah, it's greening for sure.
But it's a really cool sounding guitar. And, it's to your point of something you said earlier, because he's had the opportunity to play a lot of these out on stage in the public, right? And when you're a good guitar player and you're getting really, really good tones out of your guitars, it's almost magnetic. If there's a guitar player in the audience, they're gonna come to the stage and ask you, "Yeah, what are you playing? Where'd that guitar come from?" Because it's not a Fender logo. That one's got a Roadrunner logo on it. Other ones nowadays have Penguin logos on it. And people are like, "What are you playing?" Right? And they come up, and to your point, the guitar players spread the word, and we try to build everybody's, as we tell everybody, pretend you just got famous and somebody was going to come out with your signature guitar. You know, what would that look like? And let's build that. Let's make it your own, right? Trey's got his guitars. Everybody knows those guitars, right? So how do you build your own guitar? How do you make it your own? And that's what we strive for with everybody.
I mean, from the moment and again, folks, join us on YouTube.
Yeah.
Just to see my reaction to that guitar when Kenny picked it up. I mean, gosh, it like right there in that angle. Oh my
Let's
God,
get the
that is
sun out a little bit. There we go.
oh the grain and just like the
You see
cutout on the one
the wear
side.
right here.
It's
That
just
tiny spot.
it's a gorgeous instrument. I
I
mean, it
appreciate that. Thank
just
you.
it like from the second you pull like and like no disrespect to the other one looked like just that's a guitar that I'm gonna see and like I'm gonna hear that and think, man, this guitarist knows what's up. This guitar, the one you're holding right now, is one that I would see, and this that was going to be my next question, Ed, was what kind of questions do guitarists ask? Because it never occurred to me until you said it, and it never occurred to me the importance of having a unique logo on the headstock. Because that, as you pointed out, that's identifiable. So now, with regards to the previous guitar, a different logo, like this guitar is unique in and of itself. It doesn't look like, I mean, even to my untrained eye, it does not look like the typical guitar that you would see hanging in a guitar center, right, for sale. The other guitar, maybe a little bit more so.
It's got a more
That
traditional look to it. Yeah.
more traditional look, exactly. I mean, but that I mean, that guitar looks like the cover of Farmhouse. It's incredible. Like, it's really like I'm stuck on that, guys. It's just a beautiful instrument, and
Appreciate that.
what
Thank you.
you're very welcome, sir. And what I was gonna ask to either of you, what sort of questions, see that's I would see that guitar and I would ask, sure, yes, what are you playing? But what are some of the more technical questions that you get asked when people see or hear your guitars? Like that to me is really what fascinates me a little bit. I'm curious to know what a guitar player asks you.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you what I asked. You know, I'll be honest, I don't think most people know what to ask. I think they don't know what takes and what goes into it. And I didn't at the beginning. But there were things that I was like, can we make it the exact same? Can we make the shape of, the heel or the shape of the neck the same, the radius, the frets? I want it exactly the same. So, there's a lot that goes into it rather than just, the color or the style. It's breaking it down to, what pickups you want, with the electronics, what kind of wiring, what kind of capacitors, you know, um, you know, the type of wood, the grain of wood, the dots that you see that are in this, the binding of the guitar, what type of, what kind of nut do you want? Like some people like the brass one, some people like the bone, some people like the plastic. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and you're able to choose all that. When you go and just grab, a plain Jane guitar from a store, you don't get that choice. And most of the time, that information isn't available right there. You have to do the digging and look online. But you know, you can change or pick anything you want,
Yeah.
and you can modify it at any time for the most part, at least, the finished product. And that's what I've been doing with this.
And a lot of times, too, to Kenny's point from earlier, not everybody knows exactly every variable that they want when they first show up. Sometimes it's, I want a light guitar or a heavy guitar, right? Or I would love a smaller body style or a larger body style, right? And usually it's the part of the guitar that your hands touch make the most sense, as far as like when people want to get creative. I think like for the first thing that comes to mind for me is the guitar neck itself. You can have really big ones or really thin ones, and a lot of that is more personal preference. But what's interesting about this is when I first engage with somebody to build a custom instrument, I take them through an interview process and an experience like they've never seen before. Because to Kenny's point, when you say, "Hey, what kind of nut do you want?" They're like, "Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Can you educate me on that real quick?" Well, absolutely, because I love to geek out with people, right? So I'm like, here's what brass sounds like, here's what bone sounds like, here's what Teflon sounds like, right? And you can do that with frets. You could do that with the electronics, the pickups, the wood. Like every piece matters. Everything that goes into the guitar, especially if it touches the string, it matters. And every instrument that you build is really the sum of all the individual parts put together. And that's why you can go, into what we refer to as the showroom. There's 40 or 50 guitars down there, and a lot of them will look similar, but they all sound different and they all play different because all the recipes for each one of those guitars is just a little bit tweaked, right?
Yeah.
So if I sit down and somebody's like, "Hey, I'm primarily a blues player and I'm not usually gained up," I'm like, "Okay, well, we're going to use pickups that really have a lot of headroom in them," right? Whereas if somebody's like, "Listen, I don't even use my tone control. It's, on 11 at all times. It's searing hot distortion the entire time." Well, okay, we're going to build that guitar a little bit different, right? So I want it to sound the way they want it, but at the same time, it's got to, kind of like what you said with the other one, is like when you sit down, it's got to feel perfect in the hands. And once you're there, that's all the difference.
The other thing that we offer, besides just custom making and to order, is the repairing and modifications of existing guitars too. So if you have a guitar that's not playing right, it doesn't necessarily have to be, there's something wrong with it, but just getting it set up is usually 90% of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like the way it is because, cosmetically, or, you want to add a feature to it, that's what we did with this one. I did not get any say on this one because this was in an auction, but
We changed a lot afterwards.
well, we changed, we put DiMarzio super pickups, distortions,
Super distortions, yep.
and then we put where were the locking tuners?
The hip shot.
Hip shot locking tuners, which is a definite upgrade.
Could you just for our audience who's probably, I mean, even I can you describe a little bit what hip locking tuners are?
So
just because again, we've got, including myself, the layperson's audience when we're talking about, and I have some questions about some other elements too, but let's start with that.
So hip shot, they're locking tuners. It's the brand. They make a lot of great stuff. But the tuning keys on the guitar, like I mentioned earlier, you have to thread them through and the tension keeps it there. The string locked in. But sometimes the strings, depending on the gauge and the posts, they slip. So instead of wrapping it around the post, which I don't know if you could really see, it's not wrapped around.
I was gonna say the it looks so clean up at the top.
You could see the little ends peeking out.
Yeah.
It's not wrapped around. It's because they're behind this.
There's little gears back
There's
here.
little gears back here that when you
Locks the string
wind
in.
it pushes it up. Now this is different than a Floyd Rose, and you see these on all the 80s and 90s, headbangers, all the, the dive bombs and everything. This is different. This is not a locking nut. This is different.
But it really adds a lot of stability, I think, overall to the guitar. Makes string changes really quick and easy
Very
also.
quick.
So if you blow up a string on stage, it's real fast to change it if you have to. And these particular ones, the Hip Shot brand, in my particular opinion, is they're just so smooth. And they're so precise when it comes to tuning. And generally speaking, if a guitar has tuning issues, it usually starts here.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's like the magic of making a custom instrument is that you get,
Yeah.
I'm sure is that you get to discover all of these things about, and one of the things that you guys were speaking about that I picked up on the most. Now, I know that the different components make a guitar sound different. The wood choice, it comes down to every little part of it. But the way that you guys broke it down, it's almost like it's not just a recipe, but a recipe that you know each ingredient so well that like when you mentioned before, like here's what plastic sounds like, here's what bronze sounds like, here's what Teflon sounds like, you know to be able to like just to be able to put that sentence together, like this is what brass sounds like in a guitar, in this part of a guitar, but with this component or with this one or with these backs or with that. It's just it's it's what's needed in any good craft for any good craftsman is to truly understand each component of the guitar, and that's what I love hearing from you guys. I remember Mike, who we've spoken about, built a guitar for Justin Recamp from Munyon, and Justin wanted an abalone inlay, and I thought it was cosmetic until I heard him play the guitar. And I was like, "Sir, this is a Wendy's. You can't do that here. Like that's not okay. Like this is I mean, and Justin is a great guitar player. I personally think Mike's guitars make him that much better, and it sounds like your guitars do just about the same thing. And I love the customization factor of it and that element of really breaking it down bit by bit and being able to build truly from scratch.
If you take all that away, and this is my opinion and more so my factual opinion, like if
It's my opinion, but I'm right.
yeah, but I'm right. Yeah, it's my factual opinion that none of that, again, this is, this might, some people in the comments might, roast me on this, but, none of it truly matters. Like, yes, having an instrument that works the right way, and there's a lot of factors to make it, work well. Ed said that this, made a good point to say that these guitars are made of wood, and they come from the trees, they get cut down, and you have a log, and you're taking this log and you're cutting all the skin off of it, and you're forming it and binding it and turning it into a different shape, and the guitar is going, ah, I'm not a tree anymore. Why? And so, and this is a far-fetched opinion of mine, but like, this is why guitars that are 50 years old, 100 years old, you know, have these certain sounds to them because they finally realized, like people, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm here to do now. So there's a factor of that, of like if you have all the right things on a guitar, yes, it can sound good. You have the factor of the guitar, maturing over time, like people do. And then if you take all that away, you know, I think all my guitars sound equally different, but most people would think they sound the same, and that is because of the person. And it comes with the maturity of the person itself and how they're able to manipulate it. And you hear it all the time, the tone is in the fingers, which is true, but there's a lot of technique that goes into stuff. And
Fingers are still on the person.
yeah,
And so the tone
yeah,
might be in
and
the
sound
fingers, but it just
like,
depends whose fingers.
yeah, like there's a lot of people that try to manipulate and try to sound like Trey or Jerry, but it's always missing a little thing, and it's the fingerprint. and you can't do that. You can get all the buffers, you can get all the amps and all the JBL speakers you want and chain it up with the oboe and get everything to sound right, and you can get the Languedoc, and I've seen people do it, but most of the time, they're still chasing this one thing. I can make it sound better, and it's not. It's not that, because all individual people sound different, and they sound, for the most part, I'd say at least 80% the same on any guitar.
Might catch a bit of heat for saying this in follow up, but I almost think that play. Oh boy. All right, yeah, here it goes. I almost think that playing a Languedoc and trying to sound like Trey makes you sound worse, because it's such a specific look. Like it makes sense, like when you go see Dark Star Orchestra, if they're playing one of Jerry's guitars, right? That's a there, but there's no one that I've seen that plays a Languedoc to the audience that Trey does. And I mean, like the guitar was made for him. He is the prototype. If you're coming, in my opinion, if you are coming out onto a stage with that instrument and that's the same genre of music that you're playing, I think the music suffers for it, because you're just trying to do something that can't be done. And I love the way you put it. What's missing is the finger.
So, you can sound like anybody that you want. You could, you know, you could spend the hours listening to this stuff. It's going to take you a lifetime to do it if you really want to. You know, I am heavily influenced by a lot of people that I think I sound similar to. But, you know, Miles Davis says it the best. The hardest thing to do is to sound like yourself. And a lot of these people sound like themselves. And if you can take elements of people and do that, that's great. I might be a walking contradiction because I have a Languedoc copy. I have it over here if you want to see it. But it's it's not just the guitar, the look, the sound. It's a lot that goes into it. I've spent a lot of time trying to sound like myself. I listen to recordings of a lot of people, and then I listen to the recordings of me, and I go, that sounds like me.
Yeah.
It's
hard thing to do. It's super hard.
It really is. And I only know this from the perspective of being a comedian. But when I was starting out my career and I was writing jokes, jokes are, I say writing, but jokes are built of individual components, similar to a guitar or really any instrument. And something that you said about that guitar that you're holding, about how or I think it might have been the previous one, that you're still refining it and adding and taking away. A joke is a living document. A joke is something that's always getting slightly modified or there's no such thing to me, even for my own material, as a static joke. However, there are some jokes that I've written that, for me, like if anybody were to ask me what are like your 3 quintessential jokes that are like your jokes, I know a good handful that I can tell that if you're not, if it's not my fingerprint on it, like everybody can tell the Aristocrats. Everybody can say it's the easiest joke in the world. But can you make it good? Because it's a terrible joke. It's so bad. Like, it's a bad joke. The punchline sucks. But if you're good, if you're Billy Connolly, if you're Bob Saget, if you're George Carlin, nobody tells that joke like you just told that joke. And every time you tell it is different from and it's that signature element of it. And going back to recordings of myself, it's a combination of delivery, stage presence, crowd, emphasis. Am I hitting the right notes at the right time? Am I hitting the punchline correctly? Am I timing it out properly? Is there maybe a little bit more of a bridge that needs to be added? Is it maybe too long and something needs to get taken out? Did this hit right? And then where in the set does it go? Right. So I can really, as I like to say, I resemble that remark in that, that it's really about who's telling it, because anybody can, if a comedian writes a good joke and it's funny, anybody can tell that joke and get a laugh, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're funny. And it took a long time for me. I think I started doing stand up in 2005, and it wasn't really, if I'm being honest with myself, it wasn't really until about 2011 that I was able to look at my own jokes and really, this one, that's me. Nobody else tells these jokes.
Yeah.
Like I've listened to all the comedy. I took in when I was younger as much as I possibly could. And you're always cross-referencing it to make sure that nobody's told that joke before or done that specific thing. And bringing it back to your world, is there ever any pressure as you're creating an instrument to make it unique, to make it its own? Or is it something that you just kind of understand at this point and accept that, like, you know what? We already know our instruments are going to be what they're going to be? Or is there still an internal push to be like, we have to make it specifically different?
It's interesting as I build these, one of the things that comes up when I first start with a guitar, I don't have a full-blown blueprint built out of this is exactly what I'm going to do. Like I have an understanding of what the color might look like, but we'll see what it actually ends up when the product is done, right? So because of that, there is endless tweaking and changes and, to use an old term, some happy accidents that happen along the way, right? That end up having a deep impact on what that final guitar ends up looking like, which is kind of cool. So I have found, to kind of go back, it's interesting when you guys were talking about fingerprint and kind of learning your own, there's a bunch of just little things that I do along the way I think are starting to make my guitars kind of feel like mine. Meaning if it was 20 years from now and somebody showed back up and said, hey, did you build this one? I think I could probably pick it up pretty quick and know if it's mine or not. So, yeah, it's kind of neat. Every one of them ends up what I think it's going to look like when it starts versus where it ends up at the end is usually close, but it's never exactly what I thought it was going to be.
It's always nice to get some music into an episode about, music.
That's why we're here. I mean, these guitars are supposed to be fun to play. I feel like a lot of people have a love-hate relationship with their instruments, and if they can play well, like so that you're not fighting against it, you're winning.
It's interesting. To that exact point, I do a lot of setup work for people that are thinking like, hey, I'm going to sell this guitar. I just don't like the way it plays. It doesn't feel good on, I'm not a Les Paul guy or whatever. I mean, I hear it all. And they're like, I just want to get it nice and playable so I can go and sell it so when somebody comes by and everything else. I'm like, cool, I got you. So we bring the guitar in, we do a ton of work. I give it back to them. And they're like, it's never played like this before. This is amazing. And next thing you know, they're like, I'm not selling it anymore. And that has happened so many times. They're like, I just thought this was just not put together the right way. And then, you give me about an hour with the guitar on the bench and you can turn a guitar that doesn't play real well into something that plays real well. So we've even got a couple of reviews on our website that speak exactly to that point because it's happened so many times now.
What would you say, getting just to that, what would you say the bulk of your work is? Does it come in like these repairs and modifications, or is it more so in the instrument creation space, or is it a split?
It's definitely a split as far as what I spend my time on, but the volume is different. So, for example, setup work or modifications or changing pickups or whatever, that might take an hour or two so I can get a lot of those through. Where when we hand build a guitar, it's somewhere between, call it 40 and 100 hours to do one, depending on how detailed we're getting with it. But what it's fascinating to me is I get a lot of emails. I think we're the shop in the area that's not afraid to take on hard stuff. Because I get a lot of emails from people going, "Hey, I've talked to 4 or 5 other luthiers in there, and they don't want to take this project on, or whatever the case might be." I was telling Kenny earlier, I have a 12 string in the shop right now that the neck's not attached to the body anymore, right? And they're
An
like, "Can
issue?
you fix this? It cratered on itself." And I'm like, "Yeah, give me a shot." Or I installed a kill switch for an amazing 13-year-old guitar player in the area the other day, but I had to drill a hole in the front side of the body to do it. And if you get that wrong, now you're looking at a full refinish of a guitar. And I find that a lot of shops won't take that work on. Where
It's a big risk.
I get more excited about the harder something is. Like, give me something that's broken, destroyed, rusted. Has it been through a fire? Like, that will be fun for me to work on. I mean, don't get me wrong, we do a ton of setups. My goal is to make sure that when somebody gets their guitar back, I always refer to it as being stage ready. Like, when you get it, I want you to be able to get on stage and it's good to go. But a vast majority of what we're doing is repair and upgrade work.
Ed, could you say what a setup is?
Actually, that's
That's
probably a good point.
It's a great point.
You
Thank you,
know,
Kenny. I love your show, by the way. Secondhand Talent's great.
yeah, thanks. It's a work in progress every day.
Yeah, it's funny.
And don't forget our sponsors.
Realizing that not everybody's a guitar player, right? So when we do a setup for somebody, essentially what that means is they're bringing their guitar by us, and we are going to super tune it, and we're going to change all the little things to get it back to, call it factory settings, if you will. And what I mean is keep going back to the idea that guitars are trees, right? They're wood, so they move. Depending on how humid things are, how dry is, your neck can move, all kinds of things can move. And what's interesting to me always is I could change the height of the strings off the neck by like 10 thousandths of an inch, and you can feel those kind of things, right? So little tiny little changes again all add up to everything. So it's makes all the difference in the world of whether guitar is easy to play or hard to play. So we make sure that it's intonated properly, make sure everything's tightened, make sure everything is set up right, the pickup height, everything is just perfect and ready to go.
Height. Now that's exactly kind of building off of what I just thought of, as you were saying that is, getting back to our fingerprint, we're all individual different human beings. We're all built differently and we all have different kinds of fingers. Some people have wider fingers, some people have thinner fingers, some people have longer or shorter fingers. And to be able to match, like, all right, like, and to identify that, like, okay, maybe it's just needs to be a little longer, or do you need a little more space
That's
in
it.
between these strings, and like to see that so it's so cool to me to consider, and I'm trying to put words together about it, so I'm stalling with other words, but it's almost like you're taking, well, not almost, you're taking a real multifaceted approach to how you build the instrument, to where you're not just trying to use all the best parts, but also to tailor it to the individual who's playing it.
Absolutely. So much so that even when somebody comes and picks up their guitar from me, if they're new to me and we're just getting to know each other, before they leave, I'll plug them into an amp and say, "All right, play. What do you love? What do you hate? Should we tweak something real quick? Is one string a little too high or a little too low? Is it a little too bright? Like, what are you feeling right now?" Because I want to make sure when they leave, they love it. Then I make good notes and I try to replicate that every time they come back.
Besides parts and style, I guess this would fall under the style, but there's a lot of stuff that can can change, like I said, radius of the fretboard, or these tuners being in line. These are considered in line. When you have 3 and 3, that's different. Or scale length of the nut to the bridge, but the string doesn't end at the bridge, it's ending at this tailpiece. So there's a lot of different things, sorry, I'm gonna hit you.
Get injured during
Yeah,
the
sorry.
interview.
It's part of rock and roll, baby.
Secondhand talent.
Yeah. Secondhand talent. You'll get hurt here.
We're clipping that. That's gonna be a clip. Secondhand talent. You'll get hurt.
Tight cut on the face, please. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of other stuff, and heights and it's a big thing. I'm sure you can vouch for this one, that he'll give me a guitar and I'll be like, the G is high or the high E is high, and he'll go, no way. And I'm like, 100%. And maybe it's just me, but
no, your ability to sense is amazing.
Right. He'll go, it's off by a fraction of a fraction. I'm like, I could feel it.
Quarter of a turn of the screw.
Yeah. People don't know, but I know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just my ability, but I have been blessed with that ability to be able to tell if something's off. It's the smallest little adjustment sometimes can, help. If it's, I'm hearing a noise. I mean, we were just discussing this, now, I'm hearing a noise when I play certain, note, and there's a frequency that's making the guitar buzz. Most people don't know what that is or have a care to fix that, but I'm like, that's incorrect. It needs to be fixed.
Well, there's certain I think that's actually quite fascinating, because I can only relate it to my own instrument, which is myself, and my so-called wit. But there are jokes that I've written that I just won't tell anymore because they're not funny to me. It's still a funny joke. It would still land, but I don't find it funny. It could be for various reasons. But if I don't feel good about it, I'm not going to tell it on stage. All's to say, coming back to, what you were just talking about, when you're playing, whatever your instrument is, whatever your medium is, so if you're an artist, if you're a musician, if you're a comedian, your art is an extension of yourself. In the best of senses, I really feel like Secondhand Talent, is an extension of my artistic capabilities just as much as any of my stand-up comedy ever was. And you have to really be feeling it and know yourself, because the audience can tell if you don't feel great about a joke, right? And I'm sure it's the same. And I'll relate this to this. One of the only bands that I can really pull this out with is Fish, is because there's just such a body of work there. But what blows my mind is that people will argue about what's the best live version of this song. And we take into account, when we do those comparisons, what mode was the band in? Was it in the cow funk era? Was it in after the reunion? Was it in the 80s? And there's all these factors. How good is the recording? All of these factors that get taken into consideration, and different factors by different people over the same piece of music. And I do think it speaks to your ability, but I also think it speaks to your professionalism as a musician to have that direct connection and feeling with the music that you're playing, and knowing and being able to trust your gut in that it doesn't feel like it sounds right. Kind of getting back to earlier in the conversation when we were talking about, describing sound as almost a physical thing, having that feeling that the sound is off a little bit. I take that very akin to, being a comedian, and just, it doesn't feel right to me telling the joke. So even though it's going to work, I'm not going to do it because the tuning, as we'll say, is off.
Exactly to your point, When a guitar player gets out on stage, the curtains going up, the lights are coming on, and everything else. The last thing I want them to be worried about is their guitar, right? And it's got to be right. It's got to be perfect for them. The string heights have got to be right, and you need to be thinking about your performance and thinking about the song, and you should not be thinking about the instrument in your hand. If you're worried that it's going to go out of tune, you're going to break a string, or whatever the case might be, then you need to do some work with your instrument, right? And it's exactly to your point. If you get on stage and you're telling a joke and you're just not feeling it, it's not going to land right. And it's the same way with your guitar when you're performing in front of crowds of people.
No, I fully agree, and I mean, like, like, getting back to Fish, like, there's definitely been times where I've seen them where it's like, they just don't look comfortable playing this song. Like, maybe it's rusty, maybe it's an off night, but, like, there's just, like and they might play, like, a really sloppy Down with Disease and then put extra energy into the jam because they know they fucked up, and, like, they're trying to make up for it because it's like, "Oh, god damn it, I missed the lyrics and fucking the second verse again." And, they're putting a little extra mustard on the jam to help kinda make up for it on the back end. Because I often find it's the songs where they have miscues early on that turn out to be some of my favorite versions as a complete song because there's that same self-acknowledgement of, okay, we had a misstep here. Let's put a little bit of extra energy towards the way that we're going to carry the rest of this out. Thinking back on, 16 years of seeing Fish, it really is interesting how that's been a consistent pattern where the error at the beginning almost pushes the band harder and further forward into a more creative space. So, one of the final things I wanted to touch on before we concluded this rather epic interview is we covered a lot of ground here, much like the mighty penguin across the tundra. You don't just make guitars, and I rather than list, I would rather hear from you. What other instruments have you gotten yourselves into?
Yeah, so we obviously guitars was the starter of it, which we've done a few basses along the way because again, just a different version of the guitar. But we also
Maybe
have built.
bring the mic a little closer to you, and
You bet.
yeah, and I'll count us back in and re-ask the question.
Sounds good.
Really
Is
low.
that better? Can you hear me?
Yeah, 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 much better.
Okay.
All right, 3, 2. So one of the last things I wanted to touch on before we conclude our rather glorious interview, I think we covered a lot of ground here. I'm going to include the joke from the cut we didn't use, much like the mighty penguin. And it's flying across the top. I'm just thinking it going like "Wah, wah, wah, wah." One of the interesting things that you all do outside of custom builds for guitars and outside of custom repairs for guitars and setups, um, you dabble in other instruments as well. I'm curious as to what sort of instruments and how that came about.
So guitars, of course, bass guitars, of course, that's kind of the same family. But we've also built a little bit of a following with ukuleles and call it small acoustic guitars, if you will. So we've done a bunch of those. Those are always available on the website also. And there's a lot of personalization that can be done with them. And then just by way of, helping others with guitars and stuff, I've started working on things like violins and cellos and just dare I say, if it's got strings on it, it's made of wood and used to be a tree at one point in time, I'm probably interested in working on it. So we certainly the electric guitar is kind of the driving force behind a lot of what we're building right now. But we'll take on a lot of different projects. Like I said, ukuleles, they probably do a half a dozen or a dozen of those per year too, which is kind of neat. Hmm.
Would you say your if you had to pick an instrument to work on that's not a guitar, and that's we got Mr. Bloom Jangles playing his ukulele here, so it's a
Yeah.
great little tie-in. But I guess same question to both of you. If you had to pick an instrument to work on that's not a guitar to play, it's not a guitar that's stringed, what would it be?
Probably a violin. It's got such a. I've just got a. Violins have such a cool sound to them, right? I mean, they just, if you really do it right, the tone that can come out of them is just absolutely amazing. So, dare I say, the only reason I don't build those on a regular basis right now is I haven't leveled up to that yet. Like violins that's a whole different deal, and so maybe someday we'll get there. But that would probably be the next thing I would do.
Kenny, how about you?
I think it would be cool. I think it would be cool to start servicing upright basses, which is not something we do, and I don't think that's something we necessarily want to do right now because it's time consuming and super expensive. You're talking about a super large
Violin.
Yeah, super large big violin.
Super large
Yeah,
violin.
it's big. Yeah,
Super massive violin.
yeah. It's just you don't see a lot of people doing that, but I feel like that could open up a market. So I feel like that would be something cool to do down the line.
And you guys have come back to this theme time and time again about taking on the challenge. And that, if, you know, with both of those instruments, with the violin, not only do you have the intricacies of the instrument, but the history that you're working with. Secondhand Stradivarius. You can immediately think of one of the most famous violin makers of all time, and or talk about pianos, Steinway. You really, there are names and legacies associated with these instruments, and then on the other end of the spectrum, the upright bass. What I heard when you were saying that, and tell me if I'm off at all. Like I heard like challenge accepted.
Yeah,
I
I'm
want
on
to
the
take
same.
on the toughest and biggest, baddest instrument that's in this family and make it a part of our family.
Absolutely.
It's
It'll be
fighting
fun to
words,
see what it turns
boys.
into. There we go. Now I got a new idea. We're gonna start doing violins, aren't we?
And folks, it would never have happened without Secondhand Talent.
Without
So you can
secondhand talent. So
so you can
you heard it
expect to
here
see
first. Right?
Dr. Decibel burned into all of the Penguin guitars now because of that suggestion, and I'm going to hold them to it. Folks, this has been an amazing episode of Secondhand Talent with Ed and Kevin. Oh my God, I messed it up. Natural segue is
Kenny.
gone. Oh my God, no. 3, 2. Folks, this has been a phenomenal episode. Kenny, Ed, any words you want to leave us with before we finish off? Words of wisdom, guys.
I would say come check us out. Check out some of the socials, hit the website. If you send us a message, one of us is going to respond to you, right? This is not a huge corporate situation, right? We're here to work together with guitar players to try to put together a really, really awesome experience. And I will tell you, it's my number one goal with every instrument I build, and I tell every guitar player this. I want this to be your absolute favorite guitar. And I'm committed to making sure that we get there.
Right on. Kenny, anything you want to add on top of that?
No, he did pretty well. Yeah, just check us out. Give us a chance. If you have something, um, that you want to repurpose or reuse, or get back to playing, utilize you know, um, our repairs and everything that we do, and we're trying to offer lower prices right now to try to help some people, and so if you're looking to you know get back into it, or if you've put it down, I'd say just this might be your sign to do so.
Yeah. And Ed, before we part, congratulations on 100 episodes, man. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you very much. It is wild to have passed that mark, and one of the things that I love being able to do with this show is to platform small businesses such as Penguin Guitar Company, because you guys are doing really awesome work out there. You're making some incredible instruments, helping people repair old ones. And you're not far from us. You know, we're based here in Chicago. You're over there in Elgin, folks. You can check out all of the links for socials, website, etc. All that information in the description of this episode. We have Ed. We have Kenny. It's Penguin Guitar Company. I am Steiner, and this has been another episode of Secondhand Talent, and we will see you next Wednesday. That's a podcast. There we go. We did it. All right, now I'll tell you a joke that I'm not going to tell anyone else.